Hi, Craig Wilson here, and welcome to the Making the Media podcast. It's great to have you with us for our latest episode. Now, we've talked a lot about AI in the podcast, with a lot of that focused on what it might mean for the creative process, for journalists or for editors, for example. But an area where AI is already having an impact is on the enrichment of metadata and the work of the archivist. So that is the subject we're going to explore in this episode. Our guest is Kathey Battrick, who is the Senior Manager for Library and Media Management with Asharq News, based in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Before we discuss her current role and the innovative ways that Asharq's various channels are looking to take advantage of AI, I asked Kathey about her career and her wide experience within the industry.
I've had a long history, I guess, in archives and media asset management. I project managed the first fully digitised archive, as far as I'm aware, which was British Pathé. I was the online project manager for that project. We were awarded a lottery grant to digitise all of the content, which at that point, I think it was about 6,000 hours or so, all on film, which had to be telecined, transferred to Digibeta in those days, and digitised from Digibeta. So that was a pretty groundbreaking project for its time. If I remember rightly, the news of the project reached the New York Times. It was a great project, and that was probably my first step into this kind of area. From British Pathé, I moved to ITN. ITN took on the representation of the British Pathé archive, and I moved over to ITN with the archive. Started off in sales for a short period of time before moving back into project management. And honestly, that was an amazing time. It was the very beginnings of kind of digital transformation of the archive business at ITN. And I was instrumental in digitizing their archive, going tapeless, worked closely with the technology teams on all of these projects. And this was all underpinned by a media asset management system. And honestly, it was a fantastic project. We digitized 20,000 or more, I think, tapes and film dating back to 1955. And that also included flash scanning or OCR capture of the old-fashioned kind of index cards that the library was catalogued on, the older library was catalogued on. Later on, we digitised Reuters Archive, as ITN managed the Reuters Archive at that time. And then two of my bigger projects towards the end of my years at ITN was to transfer the archive back to Reuters. They took their archive back in-house again. And then finally to outsource the clip sales of the ITN archive to Getty Images. And that was my final project there. I worked for myself for some time, working on a number of projects across digital asset management, media asset management, an AI startup, and my first consultancy role in the Middle East led to my role here at Asharq today.
So tell us a bit about your role at Asharq, and then we'll talk about Asharq itself.
Yeah, so in 2019, I was contacted by our great leader, Dr. Nabil, and he asked me to help him set up and lead the library and media management department for a new channel he was working on. So I moved from the UK to UAE in December 2019 to do exactly that. And I had the really exciting opportunity and ability to bring AI into this department from a very early stage. And we've now been using AI for 3 or more years to help enhance the metadata for our archive content.
So you mentioned there when you talked about your previous career and the work that you did in terms of digitizing older archives and moving into the sort of digital world. Obviously, with something like Asharq, it's a brand new channel that is kind of getting going. So what was the contrast like between what you'd done previously and moving into this kind of newer environment?
It was exciting because actually this was the first time I'd been involved from day one in terms of setting up and leading an entire department. So of course that hiring the people within the department, but it also involved working with the technology team to set up the asset management platforms and the archive platform. And then secondly, implementing AI to help support the metadata creation process. So it had a very different focus on innovation and creation and being able to set up those, draw on my years of knowledge to set up efficient working processes and workflows from day one.
Yeah, so we'll come on to talk about that specifically. But the other thing, so you mentioned that was back in 2019 that you moved across, but Asharq itself has seen growth through the last sort of 4 or 5 years as well.
It has. It's been such an exciting time. So Asharq News went on air in November 2020. It's been a really fast-growing, multi-platform Arabic news and broadcast channel. So it's available on broadcast channels and multiple social media and digital platforms. And since then, we have expanded to include Asharq Documentary, or Asharq Al-Wathaiqiyya, and Asharq Discovery with Warner Brothers Discovery, And we also have audio offerings such as Asharq Podcasts and Radio Asharq with Bloomberg. So there's been a huge amount going on since we've launched. It's been an exciting time. I'm really proud to have been a part of this growth. I believe we are emerging as the fastest growing news platform in MENA. And we have something like 60 million followers, I believe now, and over 150 awards. So I'm just really excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, exciting times and lots of media, and lots of media that then needs to be catalogued and archived. So just on that point, what is the kind of volume of media that you're dealing with across, I guess, all of those different channels and departments?
In terms of archiving and cataloguing or AI indexing, it equates to about 1,600 hours per month. But there's also additional content on top of that we are archiving that we're not necessarily indexing for various reasons. So if we've got multiple versions of a program, for example, not all of those programs would be AI indexed.
So you mentioned there about AI. How is AI sort of enriching the metadata in the sort of workflows that you're looking at?
So from a very early stage, I knew we would want to have multilingual metadata. It's important for us and our users to be able to search for content in English and Arabic. Our colleagues are from many different backgrounds and many different countries, and the search preferences in terms of language will differ from person to person. Sometimes that's also influenced by the other content that they're looking to use, as we receive agency content into our production asset management platform, where the metadata, for example, is predominantly English. So in those cases, if the user's looking to use content from across the whole breadth of this material we have coming in, they may prefer to use English. So we were really, we wanted to make sure we had that multilingual aspect. And we've been managing that through in using AI services to index our content. And additionally, just to make sure they can find the exact shot or soundbite or person they need very quickly without having to scroll through, minutes of video, which although is not tape-based now, there's still a time overhead with trying to find that content if you're having to watch a lot of material. So the efficiency and speed of getting the content to air is key.
I mean, AI, as we've mentioned before, is an area that's constantly developing. We've seen this whole explosion of interest in AI, in particular over the course of the last 18 months. But as you mentioned earlier, it's been around for some time. So what are the kind of services that you're using? And I presume that's developed over time as well as perhaps new services have become available.
Yeah, definitely. So we started with the I guess I could call it traditional now, with the traditional people, face recognition, object detection, transcription, translation, and some on-screen character recognition. That was our kind of starting point. So objects, we'd recognize objects, scenes, emotions, landmarks, logos, and of course people. And each of those is associated with a thesaurus entry, naming, describing, and providing any alias or synonyms for that person or object in English and Arabic. So straight away, we were getting very rich metadata about our content in both languages. And then in more recent months, we've been moving more towards use of large language models to generate metadata. For example, we archive around 70 to 100 kind of different types of interviews a day. And the news librarians will define who's speaking and provide us a quick summary describing what they're speaking about. And this now is almost automated. With that metadata is automatically generated. They're heavily supervised by the news librarians. So we are now generating those kind of interview summaries automatically under human supervision. We're also automatically suggested titles for some of our content. So we keep a copy of, or archive a copy of all of our produced social media content, the video content, and we automatically suggest a title for each of those that we archive. And again, that's supervised and corrected by the news librarians. And last but not least, we're now working with the same language models to create human-like scene descriptions and identify highlights or sound bites from the content that we have archived. So things are moving very fast, and we're working hard to keep up.
Yeah, you mentioned the role of the archivist there, and I want to come back to that later on. But the overarching question I wanted to ask about that, Kathey, all the things that you described, is that all of this work that's going on is essentially designed to enhance the end user's experience. This is about making content easier to find. It's about helping people perhaps do their job more effectively. So is efficiency really what's trying to drive this, to allow people to create more content for more platforms? You talked earlier on about the various different platforms which you have. Is that what really sits behind all of this?
Yes, to help our users find the content they need more quickly and hopefully using their preferred method of search. So we will have colleagues working in the creative field, working maybe on promos or marketing content. They may be looking for more conceptual kind of shots, cityscape of Dubai or KSA, Riyadh in KSA, for example. So it's going to be really important for them that perhaps they can find the landmark, and cityscape might be that kind of search experience that they might look for. Whereas we'll have our news production teams producing content about a specific event or breaking news story. And then, of course, we have our current affairs or documentary users that might be looking for content about a certain topic or place. So it's a slightly more generic kind of search approach. And by utilizing AI, we can try to meet those different search requirements, and sometimes using different platforms to access the content in an efficient and effective way.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that what you've really described there is that you've had to look at it for different use cases for the different types of services that you service, because it's not just a news channel, it's more broad than that.
Yeah, we do. And it's the case also of just constantly assessing and reviewing what you're getting back from those AI services and whether it's still relevant. Is it good enough? Are there any issues that need to be addressed? Are there improvements that could be made? So we utilize, we human supervise the AI generated content. So the role of our archivists or news librarians, as we call them here, is they still create some manual cataloguing, but their role also is to supervise what the AI services are providing us with, and correcting and fine-tuning the metadata we get back.
How important is it for you that there is that human-in-the-loop aspect to it? That it's one thing that the AI generates it, but you have actually got someone else who's actually, still reviewing that? Because I wanted to ask about, coming from somewhere who, in my career 35 years ago, I remember going to the librarian who drew the card out of the drawer and told you the tape number it was on to go and do it. There is still a role for an archivist within a news organization.
100%, 100%. I don't see that role ever disappearing. Yes, it's changed, and I'm sure it will continue to change, but I don't feel that role will go anywhere. It's just going to change. Their objectives and the way they work with the metadata is going to change, and change rapidly.
And coming back to the initial part of that question is about how important is it to have actually someone supervising what the AI does?
Extremely important, and especially for the content that we own, that we're keeping in the archive, we want to make sure that that metadata is accurate or as good as it can possibly be. There might be certain types of content where you can apply slightly different levels of supervision, for example. But overall, it's just important that you're aware of what the AI is telling you. We want to make sure, for example, that the people detected or recognized in our rushes are being correctly identified. And if not, we will manually correct them. I think it's just as one small example. We want to make sure that there are no inappropriate hallucinations created by the AI, for example. So all of these things are incredibly important for us to supervise and try and make sure it doesn't creep into our archived content.
Yeah, are you able to do work to maybe train the models around the specifics of the market that you serve? So, for example, you talked earlier on about landmarks in certain countries, or even famous people, for example. So, different countries have different famous people that an AI service may not necessarily know about. So, are you able to do that kind of work?
I think the biggest piece of work we've done in that area and is ongoing is kind of going back to the face recognition again. So when we started on this journey, we couldn't find any data sets that provided us with the means of identifying Arab business leaders and public figures to the extent that we needed them. So as we've been moving ahead in this journey, we've been creating our own. So we are able to recognize and detect the people that are specific to our region and our news coverage in our footage. And then in terms of the kind of the descriptive videos, there is a challenge, which is with LLMs, is understanding the culture, and sometimes that can result in hallucinations. So working with our provider to try and fine-tune that is an ongoing process, and one that we haven't yet got to the end of.
Yeah, I think all these things are ongoing processes. They're never an end state. It's just different ways that things develop. One area that I wanted to ask you a little bit about was the nature of search and the kind of expectations that people have, because they're doing searches in their normal life as well as what they would do in their professional life. So over time, have you seen that sort of nature of search changing and the way how people search changing?
Definitely. I can still remember searching using the plus and minus and all of these kinds of things. And that's very rarely seen now with colleagues or just people outside of work that I observe using any kind of search platform. Definitely, we saw a kind of phase where more keyword search was being utilized, and now people are asking questions of the systems instead. So rather than White House, Joe Biden, we see users searching for things like Joe Biden standing on the White House lawn talking about, or show me all shots of Joe Biden exiting his helicopter. That kind of, prompting the search engine to return you with data rather than writing a fairly specific search string.
So from you, again, talking about your little background there and the way that you searched before and looking how it is now, I still think that within the media industry, things are changing, but it's a very exciting time. It's different to how it was, 25, 30 years ago, but it is still exciting. Is that the sense that you get of the way that the media is changing, the way that AI can be implemented to actually benefit and help journalists and others do their work?
Definitely. It's an exciting time. I still sense that I've been on a number of panels recently and from audience members and other colleagues and associates I've spoken to afterwards, in some areas there's still a bit of sense of nervousness about what this will mean ultimately for everybody. But in the large, I think there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained for users working with this kind of technology. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes next in terms of like the prompt engineering kind of style of search, which is rapidly, approaching all areas now.
And what does it mean, do you think, in terms of the amount of material that you'll have to continue to index and continue to add and enrich metadata to? Do you see that increasing because potentially the platforms that you're having to deliver to increase as well?
Quite possibly. I think from my perspective, I can imagine that because of the ability to find the content you need, that more content will be required. I know that in a previous organization, another archive organization, there was a lot of talk then about the same kind of shots always being surfaced through search time and time again. And I know that I witnessed some documentaries where I would notice shots that I had seen before. And I think perhaps with the way these technologies are emerging, perhaps we'll get more variety returned or presented to us. And I would assume, therefore, that would mean that more content needs to be indexed.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting example of even a query where you could go in and say, find me shots of X building, but not something that's been used on air in the past year, for example, would be a way of trying to do it. It goes back to that whole thing about the way that prompts are. And there is, there are already courses that exist for people about how to get the best from AI by using, effective prompts as well. So I think there's a side industry that's going to come up. There's going to come up around there.
I can imagine there will be a day where we'll have documentary producers accessing archives and asking for, show me shots of XYZ that have not been downloaded in the last year. Like if organizations are happy to make that data available as a search criteria or through search, I can imagine that, that potentially will happen, not in the too distant future.
So let's take out our crystal ball then, Kathey. What do you think what do you think are the next things that are going to be coming? It's an industry, as I mentioned before, that's changed rapidly in the last 18 months or so. What are you sort of anticipating and looking for over perhaps the next 18 months or so?
Me personally, and on behalf of my colleagues here, I would love to see more Arabic LLMs in the marketplace. I read a very interesting statistic the other day, I think it was on Hugging Face, that mentioned, the number of Arabic-speaking people in the world is not that much less than English. Apologies, I forget the number. Yet only a very small percentage of data sets that are available are in Arabic, whereas the predominant volume are in English. And that's something I think that needs to be addressed in the future. At the moment, a lot of Arabic metadata is created from translating English to Arabic, or we may find English metadata translated from Arabic. And that translation is not a direct translation. We see a lot of inaccuracies as a result. And personally, I would really love to see that addressed in the future.
So looking ahead to the future then, Kathey, do you see sort of further growth, within the region, particularly a region where, a lot of younger people are very active and interested in the sort of news market?
Definitely. There's been a lot of growth in the last few years. And I think based on the appetite in the region, and as you say, it is a young region who do tend to consume news in a way that I haven't observed in perhaps other regions. There'll definitely be growth and more advancements and more appetite for more news and entertainment products.
So, Kathey, there's a final question that I ask everybody who's been on the podcast, so I will ask you as well. And that final question is, what is it, if anything, that keeps you up at night?
It will be one of two things. Either one of my rescue cats, or it's now summer here in Dubai. It's 47 degrees, so probably the air conditioning.
I think with temperatures like that, I would have the AC up to the max as well. Thanks to Kathey for taking the time to chat with us and share her interesting perspectives on the changing role of the archivist within news organisations. Check out the show notes for more information on Avid's position on the responsible use of AI within the creative industries, with a blog from our Chief Technical Officer Kevin Riley and a white paper we've produced on the subject. You can keep up to date with all the latest podcast news, plus the rest of Avid's work on AI, by following our various social channels. And of course, please like, review and share the podcast with friends and colleagues to continue the debate. That's all for this episode. Thanks to Kathey and our producer Matt Diggs, but mostly to you for listening. Join me, Craig Wilson, next time for more of the people making the media.